Hello and welcome to Leadapreneur Online. This is module 2 of the overall learning journey of how to lead, and we're looking at the last step of this module, which is create an effective team. And as always, we start with why do teams matter? The straightforward answer is that teams are force multipliers. By enabling people to work together, you generate a synergy of creative capability. In other words, you create a unit that can create far more success and achieve far more goals than any one individual could hope to achieve on their own. So that's why teams matter, because it creates a far superior creative capability than any one individual could have on their own. And a key characteristic of great leaders is that they're able to attract great leaders and hold them together. Great leaders have the confidence to be themselves and look to have the very best people on their team to achieve the very best results. Whereas weak leaders lack the confidence that they need to attract great people because they feel insecure around those great people. And so they'll typically have people who are less good than them in order to make themselves feel better. And this is where we see the importance of the second quote here, because the essence of any effective team is trust. Simply putting people together in one room does not build a team. Teams need to be built over time through trust, as we're going to see in this presentation today. And one of the key ways in which that is achieved is by overcoming our need to always be right. In other words, in order for people to trust us, we have to be ourselves rather than pretending to be this almighty, all-knowing superhero who's never wrong. And then finally, we have this quote from Michael Jordan. Talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins championships. And what he's saying here is that you can have one or two great stars on a basketball team, and that might win you the game. But to win the championship, to win the bigger battle, that's only going to be achieved by the people working together and having the smartness to achieve the success that they want to have. Great people alone is not enough. They have to be able to work together. And that's what we see in any great football team. And we can really combine all three quotes here into this idea of the football team. Firstly, great coaches and great players attract more great players. Secondly, in order for that team to work together effectively, they have to trust in one another. They have to really believe that they will be there for one another, and they also believe that they're good enough to play together as one team. And then finally, the team will have its stars, but overall the team is only going to succeed because everyone is working together. And an effective leader recognizes that and nurtures the star power, so to say, but also looks at the overall health of the team. And that, in fact, is always a priority for an effective leader. Because in the end, a team is about being social. It's about the people that you care about, that you trust in, and that you believe in to be there for you and to support you as you work together to achieve the common purpose. So as a leader, your key priority in building a team is to nurture levels of trust, levels of care, and levels of belief in one another. And this takes us to this idea that teams don't just exist. We misuse the word team today so much. We just put a bunch of people together and say, you have to work to achieve this, now you're a team. And that just is inaccurate. It doesn't work like that. Teams need to be built over time. And they're built through a journey of self-actualization. And the task of the leader is to guide a team through that journey of self-actualization. And that's what we're going to look at in the next slide. So what is this mysterious journey of self-actualization? Well, in 1965, a researcher called Bruce Tuckman published in Psychological Bulletin a study that described the key stages that all teams seem to go through on their journey to achieving high performance. And his key realization was to recognize that simply putting people together into a team does not mean that that team is going to be successful, nor does it mean it's going to be at its peak performance. In other words, he recognized that teams need to go through a journey of development, and he identified key stages on that journey of development. And described on the slide in front of you are those stages. First comes form, then storm, norm, perform, and then it's either to mourn or transform. So lots of orming, but I'm just going to run you through what he means by these different stages. And on the left is important to recognize is performance. So on the y-axis, obviously, the higher you go up the y-axis, the better the performance of the team. So at first is the form stage, and this is when the people come together. They're typically very excited and motivated, they're invigorated by that sense of purpose, and they're ready to get on with the job. But typically what happens in a team is that instead of performance improving, it actually decreases. And the reason is because the people start to clash. They disagree on how things work. There are personality differences. There are arguments about what the right procedures are and what the right ways of doing things are. There's a long list of things that there are for disagreement. And this is the storming phase, in which people disagree over pretty much everything. And what the key point of this phase is to get those disagreements out into the open so that people can work out for themselves certain norms. So what is a norm? A norm is a habit for a team or organization. So whereas individuals have habits, groups and teams and social structures have norms. And what it means is their particular way of doing things. So for example, How does a team deal with people who turn up late to work? How does a team deal with people who deliver poor work? Or, on the other hand, people who are very successful? All the different teams and organizations have different norms or different habits around which these things are dealt with. And what is important for the team to move on to the performance stage is that they build these common agreements about how things should happen. Now, it's important to recognize that typically in any team, you're going to go through the form, storm, and norm phase through a couple of cycles. It's not an easy glide from one stage to the other. It has to be actively managed, and then sometimes you're going to have to go backwards in order to go forwards. The key point to recognize here is that the leader is responsible to guiding the team from one stage to the other. So far, the team leader has been responsible for forming the team, and also at this level, at the next stage, it's important for guiding the team through the storm phase. And what's really important to emphasize here is that the team leader is not meant to be the peacemaker. This is not a time for peace. This is a time for disagreement and people for being very honest with each other. Now, obviously, that needs to be managed in an effective way. There's no use of people shouting and being aggressive and abusive to one another. But on the other hand, there's no use pretending that people are happy with each other when they're not happy with each other, or that they're happy with a situation when they're deeply unhappy with the way that things are being done. So it's crucial that the leader finds a way in which people can storm with each other in an effective and practical manner, rather than preventing them from descending into furious arguments and endless debates. And what they're trying to do during that phase of storming is moving the team towards the norming phase, trying to develop common standards and agreements around how these people should behave together. And they need to recognize that sometimes you're going to have to do this for 2-3 cycles. So you're going to have to go through form, storm, norm, and then you have to reform and rethink about what it is you're actually trying to do. You're going to go through that a couple of times. But eventually, if you do that successfully, you're going to reach the performance stage. And this is really the most exciting phase, because this is where performance really flows from the team effortlessly. And if you've ever been in a high-performing team, you'll know how effectively they are at dealing with challenges and seizing opportunities. If you have to ask yourself, have I been in a high-performing team? Then you haven't been in a high-performing team. It's one of those things that you know it once you've had it. And this is the stage which all leaders aspire their teams to get to, because of the high levels of trust and respect in the team that's been achieved by moving through the storm and norm phase. That team is able to work together effortlessly to achieve great results. And it's worth noting that if you are asking yourself how to achieve the very highest levels of performance as a 21st century leader, what is the highest of the high? Well, that's when you combine complexity leadership theory with the performance stage. But as we mentioned in the last module, that's going to be quite challenging. But if you want to know what the highest level is, it's about putting complexity leadership in the performance stage. That's when you're going to get the greatest possible performance out of your people. But all good things come to an end. And unfortunately, there's going to come to a time when your high-performing team is going to either hit the mourn or transform stage. So I'm going to look at mourn first. So mourn is when the project has come to an end. The team has achieved its goals, or perhaps it's time for the team leader to move on, or key members of that team. The world is always changing, and you have to recognize that the team is not going to last forever. And the mourning stage represents that time where people will feel the nostalgia for what once was. They'll come together and remember together over a few drinks perhaps, hey, do you remember we had that great time together? We achieved so many great results. Wasn't that fantastic? And it's sort of this nostalgia that serves as a crucial and important reminder of what the team once was. And a team leader can play a role here of getting the people to remember and value that time. On the other hand, you have the transform phase. And what this is a requirement for the team to fundamentally change the way that it does things. In other words, the transformation stage requires that the performance paradigm is changed. Now, those are quite big words. What does that mean in practical English? Let's use an example, and of course I'm going to refer to my favorite example of a football team because it's so simple and easy. Imagine a football team that was playing on Sundays just for fun. It's just a social football team. But they get to a level where they become a really, really good social football team. And you reach a fundamental level here, which is, you've maximized the performance stage. Where do you go next? Do you go to the professional level and move from amateur to professional? Or do you keep it at the current level, but in which case your key players are going to move up to the professional league because they want to keep going forward? And so here we can understand the essence of the challenge of the transformation phase. Because if the people in the club want to move from a Sunday social club to a professional team, they're going to have to transform the way that they do everything. Now, whether that team is prepared to do that or not is another matter. If they do so, then they can move to the next level. But whether they want to do that or not is another question. And so at the end, you have two options as a team. You can either end in the mourn phase or you can end in the transform phase, and both are equally valid. And overall, the key point of the leader is to guide your team successfully through these stages. And I know I've said it before, but I just want to repeat it again. Most leaders avoid the storm stage. They get scared and nervous and don't feel confident about people being confrontational with one another. And that's pretty much the biggest mistake you can make. Because in my opinion, the storm stage builds the honesty that comes out in the storm stage, where people really say what they think and what they really believe. That honesty builds the real trust and respect that people have for each other in order to progress through the norm and perform stage in an authentic and meaningful manner. And this ties to the final point that I want to add here, is that your team members don't have to be best friends with one another. Being in a team is not necessarily about friendship. Often friendship is involved, but it's not required. Not everyone on your team has to be best friends. They just have to work together really effectively. And so don't be afraid that the storming phase will make people feel fundamental differences with one another. That's okay. What's important is that they find a way to get over those differences in such a manner that they can work together effectively, not that they have to be best friends for life. So what is the difference between a team and a group, and why does it matter? Well, it matters because there are strengths and weaknesses for each approach, and an effective leader knows when to build a group and they know when to build a team in order to get the results that are necessary. So the basic differences are that a team is focused on the we. We are in this together and we are working to achieve our common purpose, whereas a group is united under the authority of the group leader. The group leader has specified a goal or an objective, and the group has come together to achieve that objective. And what that means is that the team is united by a common trust that we're working together, we believe in each other, we care for each other for achieving the common goal. Whereas the group have come together out of necessity and under the instructions and orders to achieve the group's goal or objectives. And that's where we see the basic principle here of shared leadership versus exclusive leadership. In a team, leadership is shared. You might have the team captain, and they are, the designated responsible person. But if that team succeeds or fails, it's not because of the individual brilliance of that team captain. The whole team worked together, and they all collaborated in a highly meaningful way. Whereas in a group, leadership is exclusive. Only the group leader is empowered to make decisions and drive the group forward. And that's why there's fundamentally different levels of motivation in a team and in a group. The team is motivated to achieve the common purpose, whereas the group member is only interested in their personal success. So a great example of a team is in soccer. And here we have the logo of Football Club Barcelona. Now, obviously, some of you are rolling your eyes at this point because you're saying, well, of course, yes. Football teams are going to play like teams. But actually, if we think about the slide I've just shown you previously, a lot of supposed teams don't actually play like teams. These are teams that are characterized by their inability to work together. They have great talent, but as that quote from Michael Jordan said at the beginning of this presentation, talent is enough not to win the championship. You need to work together as a team. And so what we often see in sport is that there's great talent and great groups, but they're not actually working together effectively as a team. And Football Club Barcelona is a great example of a football team actually playing together really well as a team. They're united by a powerful common sense of purpose. And you see this in the way that they play. It's incredibly fluid. When the best two teams in the world came together in the Champions League final a few years ago, Football Club Barcelona and Manchester United, Barcelona completely outclassed Manchester United. Even though these were the two giants of the world, Barcelona outplayed Manchester United in a way that was deeply impressive. And here, I'll take a moment for transparency. I'm not actually a Barcelona fan. I don't even really follow soccer. I'm much more of a rugby kind of guy. But I can recognize excellence when I see it. And then when this team play, you can see the levels of trust and shared leadership, and that they really feel that they are working towards achieving something, and that they're rising and falling together. And that doesn't just manifest itself in the way that the club plays, but manifests in the way that the club actually behaves as a club. Their motto is more than a club. They're one of the very few clubs in the world that's owned by the fans rather than some wealthy shareholder or investment fund. And they work hard to make sure that the club benefits the overall community, celebrates the city of Barcelona and Catalan culture. So a simple way of thinking about how you can evaluate the situation in your people is to think about trust, empathy, action, and meaning. So first of all, trust. Why does trust matter in the team? If you're asking yourself this question, you need to go back to the beginning of this presentation and listen to it again. Secondly, empathy. Empathy matters because it's about putting yourself in the other person's position. You can see the world through their eyes. You can see the world through their emotions, and you understand what they're thinking and feeling. So effective teams have high levels of empathy because even though they don't necessarily all have to be great friends, they can at least understand the position and perspectives that their colleagues are taking and respect those. Thirdly, action. The team is working together as one. When you're playing football on the field, everyone is playing together. In some cases, however, when you're working in a team or a group, you'll see that a few people are doing all the work and most of the others are slacking off. That's not acceptable. Your task as a team leader is to making sure that everyone is taking on the challenges that are required of them and that everyone's working together and taking common action. Finally, meaning. And this is a very simple way of understanding this. Do the people care about the team? Does it mean something for them to be in this team? Is it a part of their identity? Ask your team members and maybe the group, do you care? Does this important for you? How important is it for you? Why is it important for you? A great team provides a great sense of meaning, and the people in that team are incredibly passionate, not only about the team's success, but the team itself and what it stands for. So 3 practical tips from this whole presentation. First, you need to think about whether you need a group or a team. Short-term results are best for group structure, whereas long-term performance is much more favorable to have a team. Guide your team through the stages of forming, storming, norming, and performing. Your task is to make sure that the team successfully transitions from one stage to the next. Do not skimp on the storm stage. The more rigorous and vibrant the storm stage is in terms of how honest people are, the greater the platform for trust and honesty and mutual respect, which leads to later on great performance. And thirdly, respect the fact that no stage can be rushed. In the same way that you can't rush a tree's growth, you can only provide an optimal environment. You as a leader cannot rush the teams through their stages. You simply focus on providing the optimal environment to enable the team to move through the stages as is necessary. So in summary, leaders need teams because they act as force multipliers. People working in a team can achieve things that no individual or even individuals working alone could ever hope to achieve. However, to build these teams, they must be built over time. They don't just magically appear. But there are strengths and weaknesses for using teams, and sometimes it's better to use groups, so an effective leader knows when to do that. So since we come to the end of this module, we can start to construct the master diagram that's going to emerge through learning these modules, and that at the end will serve as a great way of recognizing all the learning that you've done with Adepticos Online. So you might remember at the end of the last step of module 1, when we talked about purpose, we had this green star representing purpose. And so now we're going to combine the idea of purpose with the idea of passionate people. And so the first step that we need to recognize is that we need to get the right people from step 1. And that's represented in this diagram by the stick figures at the top. Only a few of them have the green purpose in their mind. In other words, those are the right people for pursuing the right purpose. And because they're the right people, you're working to attract them to the purpose as represented by the red arrows. And here we can see that you've attracted the right people to the purpose. But crucially, these people are organized around the sense of purpose. And that's what's representing step 2. You have the right leadership theory in place. And also step 3, that you've decided whether they're going to be a group or a team. That's all for now for this diagram, but as we see as the modules continue, this is going to grow, and in summary, it will demonstrate everything that you've learned through Adepticos Online.